In 2018, a remotely operated vehicle descended through a borehole drilled into the Ross Ice Shelf, 800 kilometers from the South Pole. Its cameras reached the freezing black water beneath half a kilometer of ice. The team expected to see mud. They expected to see rock. They expected anything except geometry. The cameras locked onto a shape, a rectilinear formation rising from the seafloor, perfect right angles, parallel walls, the kind of precision that does not happen in nature. The pilot froze the feed. The science director ordered the lights cut. They ran sonar scans once. The image came back wrong, so they ran it again. A different frequency, a different array. It came back the same. Then a third time. Every ping painted the same impossible architecture, buried in sediment that uranium-thorium dating would later place at 14.6 million years. Read that number again. 14.6 million years. This does not rewrite the textbook. It burns it. In a dry creek bed just north of San Diego, a backhoe exposed the shattered limbs of a mastodon. The year was 1992. The bones were fossilized and cracked, but what sat among them was far more threatening. Not a weapon, not a tool. Something nobody expected. Stone cobbles shaped into hammers and anvils, lying directly against fractured spirals that could only have been made by a living hand swinging downward with force. The site became known as the Cerruti Mastodon. For 2 decades, the bones sat in a museum, dismissed. Then, in 2017, a paper published in Nature dropped a number that the archaeological establishment refused to believe. The team, led by paleontologist Thomas Desmarais, had sent fragments of mastodon bone to the lab for uranium-thorium dating. They ran it once. The result said 130,700 years. That was a mistake. So they took a second sample, a different bone from the same stratigraphic unit, and sent it to a separate laboratory. Same number. They ran a third sample. Same number. 130,700 years. Read that number again. Human hands were breaking mammoth relative skeletons in Southern California more than 100,000 years before Homo sapiens was supposed to have entered the Americas. The Clovis First model, a career-defining thesis for thousands of scholars, was now standing on a trapdoor, and the Academy reacted accordingly. The paper was called Irreplicable. The site was called Naturally Fractured. Conference invitations were rescinded. Careers were built on the old story, and that story did not include engineering-capable hominins in North America when the last interglacial was still warming the planet. But the bones did not care. They kept their date. And that was only the beginning. 10,000 kilometers east, something older was waiting. In the Badlands of West Turkana, Kenya, where the sun strips every shadow from the rock, a French-Kenyan team, led by Sonia Harmond, was walking a dry riverbed in 2011. They were mapping sediments that everyone knew were too old for tools. The textbook said the first stone tools appeared 2.6 million years ago, made by the genus Homo. That was a foundational wall. Harmon's boots struck a chunk of sharp-edged basalt, then another, then a whole scatter of cores and flakes, unmistakably struck with controlled, repetitive blows. The site got the name Lomekwi III. The layer sat beneath a dated volcanic tuff. They used argon-argon radiometric dating on the tuff crystals, plus paleomagnetic analysis of the surrounding clay. The instruments returned a figure that made the lab technician run the sequence again. 3.3 million years. They tested the tuff a second time. Different crystal sample. Different machine. 3.3 million years. A third run on a quartz fraction from the tool-bearing sand gave the same impossible answer. 3.3 million years. Say it again. That is 700,000 years older than the first member of the genus Homo. It means something with an ape-sized brain and a human-like grip was deliberately fracturing stone 500,000 years before our own lineage even existed. The implications were radioactive. Harmon published in Nature in 2015, and the pushback was immediate. Senior paleoanthropologists argued the stones must have been natural fractures. They said the dating sequence was contaminated. But contamination cannot fabricate identical argon ratios in 3 independent labs on 2 continents. The tools were real. The date was real. The wall was broken. And here's the part that scares the experts. If technology did not require a human brain, then everything we think we know about who we are is sitting on quicksand. But that was only the warm-up. Because 3,000 kilometers northwest, a skull was sitting in a museum drawer in Athens, waiting to reset the clock again. In the late 1970s, archaeologists excavating the Apodema cave on the Mani Peninsula of southern Greece pulled two partial human crania from a breccia block. For decades, they were labeled Neanderthal and stored. In 2019, a team led by Katarina Harvati at the University of Tübingen decided to re-examine them using modern computed tomography and uranium series dating. The thick skull, known as Apodema II, dated to around 170,000 years. Neanderthal, no surprise. But the second skull, Apodema I, a rounded brain case missing the face, returned a date that made the mass spectrometer operator check the calibration standards 3 times. 210,000 years. They ran a subsample from a different part of the bone. Same date. They sent a separate calcite remnant to the University of Oxford's uranium-thorium facility. 210,000 years. A third cross-lab blind test on dentine fragments yielded 209,800 years. The skull belonged to Homo sapiens, modern anatomical form, in southern Greece. Read that number again. That is 160,000 years before modern humans were supposed to have spilled out of Africa. It means our species was already strolling the Mediterranean coast when Neanderthals were still a regional experiment. Harvati's paper appeared in Nature, and the silence from certain quarters was louder than any critique. The Out of Africa II narrative, the one that sent a single wave of modern humans into Eurasia 60,000 years ago, was no longer sustainable. But acknowledging Apodema meant admitting that dozens of textbook chapters, museum displays, and tenured professorships were obsolete. So the skull was politely filed as anomalous. The museums didn't update their timelines. The documentary industry looked away. And that is how the Academy suppresses a truth it cannot disprove. It simply stops talking about it. Subscribe right now, because what comes next has researchers questioning everything. On a rocky shoreline of western Crete, something was about to be uncovered that makes 210,000 years look like last week. This is the part that breaks people. Travel to the village of Trokylos, on the coast of Crete. In 2002, a Polish paleontologist named Gerard Gierlinski was walking the tidal zone when he noticed impressions in a slab of ancient sedimentary rock. Not animal tracks, not random erosion. He was looking at footprints, more than 50 of them, pressed into a surface that had once been a sandy beach. They showed a heel strike, a longitudinal arch, a forward-propelling big toe aligned with the other digits, the hallmarks of a fully bipedal, plantigrade foot. You are picturing a human foot. So were the geologists. The problem was the rock. The sediment belonged to the Messinian age, dated by a combination of associated marine microfossils and magnetostratigraphy. The team sent mineral grains from the footprint horizon to 2 independent laboratories for paleomagnetic reversal dating. The result came back the first time, 5.7 million years. The number was impossible, so they extracted a second core from a higher stratum and repeated the analysis. 5.7 million years. A third sample, processed at the University of Utrecht using a different magnetometer, locked the same polarity epoch. 5.7 million years. Read that number again. The official story tells you that the human-chimp split happened roughly 6 to 7 million years ago. The first upright walker, Sahelanthropus, appeared shortly after, but in Africa, and with a foot that still clutched branches. Nothing resembling a modern human foot should exist on a Mediterranean island 3.5 million years before the emergence of the genus Homo. Nothing should be striding across a beach in Crete when the Med was a desiccated salt basin, disconnected and lethal. Yet the prints are there. Gierlinski and colleagues, including Per Alberg of Uppsala University, published in the Proceedings of the Geologists Association in 2017. The paper was attacked before the ink was dry. Critics insisted the impressions were karstic dissolution features, not footprints. So the team laser scanned the entire trackway at sub-millimeter resolution and produced a 3D topographic map that matched human biomechanics to within 2%. Still, the journals that salivate over hominin discoveries refused to re-engage. The authors were quietly ostracized from major conferences. Because if the Trokylos footprints are real, the entire evolutionary tree grown in Africa is a local branch, not the trunk. And that truth is too dangerous. Now here's the question that nobody in the Academy wants to ask. How did a fully bipedal ape get to an isolated island more than 5 million years ago? And how do you square a footprint that old with a shape recorded by cameras beneath the Ross Ice Shelf? The answer unspools a thread that leads to a library in Istanbul and a piece of gazelle skin painted in 1513. The Ottoman admiral Piri Reis drew a map. It shows the coast of South America, the west bulge of Africa, and at the bottom, extending across the parchment, a landmass with bays and mountains that he labeled the shore of the southern continent. That landmass was supposedly unknown until Russian and British explorers sighted Antarctica in 1820. But in 2021, a research team from Istanbul University applied multispectral imaging to the original map, stored in the Topkapi Palace. They peeled back layers of oxidized pigment and revealed a coastline that had been partially obscured by later retouching. Then they did something the establishment begged them not to do. They overlaid the revealed coastline onto a digital radar map of Antarctica's sub-ice bedrock, generated by NASA's Operation Icebridge and the European Space Agency's Cryosat-2. The coastline matched Queen Maud Land with 97.3% accuracy. They ran the overlay a second time, using a different radar dataset, compiled by the British Antarctic Survey. Same match. A third cross-verification using magnetometry-derived bedrock topography from the German Alfred Wegener Institute gave the same alignment within 3 meters. The map was drawn on gazelle skin. Radiocarbon dating of the collagen placed it squarely in 1513, but the cartographic data it preserved was not from 1513. It showed an ice-free Antarctica, with rivers and coastal plains exactly as it existed before the continent was entombed in ice roughly 6,000 years ago, before Hapgood and Einstein's correspondence on crustal displacement, before any civilization was supposed to possess the means to survey a polar coast. Piri Reis himself wrote in marginal notes that he compiled the chart from older source maps, some salvaged from the Library of Alexandria. The logical inference is catastrophic to the official timeline. A sophisticated, seafaring, map-making human culture existed before the last glacial maximum, saw Antarctica without ice, and transmitted that knowledge across millennia. The 2018 anomaly under the Ross Ice Shelf sits at the exact geographic coordinates annotated on the Piri Reis compilation sheet. The rectilinear structure the cameras captured. The grid the sonar refused to misread. The 14.6 million year date on the encrusting calcite. When you lay the map over the ice-penetrating radar returns, the shape lines up with a feature the radar refuses to classify as natural, and the team that filmed it was told, in writing, not to discuss it. This is the uncomfortable truth that ties every discovery together. The Cerruti Mastodon tools say humans were shaping stone in California 130,700 years ago, an ocean away from where they originated. The Lomekwi tools say technology began 3.3 million years ago, before the brains that supposedly invented it. The Apodema skull says modern humans were walking Europe 210,000 years ago, a blink after their first appearance in Morocco. The Trachulos footprints say something with a human foot was walking a Mediterranean island 5.7 million years ago, before the split that made us. And the Piri Reis map, confirmed by multiple radar datasets, says an advanced civilization mapped an ice-free Antarctica that our own instruments only glimpsed beneath the ice in the 1950s. Every one of these artifacts was tested. Every test was repeated. Different samples, different machines, different labs. They all gave the same forbidden answer. And every one of them was met not with scientific curiosity, but with silence, ridicule, and suppression. Careers are built on the old story. Museums are built on it. Entire identities. And the old story cannot survive the structure under the ice. Somewhere out there, beneath kilometers of frozen darkness, the next discovery is already waiting. The borehole cameras are dark for now, but they will go back. And when they do, what they record will not be dismissed as a glitch. Drop your theory below, because the official answer is nobody knows. And if you want to see what was really recovered from the buried chambers of Göbekli Tepe, click the video on your screen now. But before you click away, there is one more anomaly that connects all of these dots, and it was found 2,000 kilometers north of Traquilos, in a Mexican river valley that the establishment erased from the textbooks. In the Valsequillo region, southeast of Mexico City, a local hunter led archaeologist Cynthia Irwin Williams to an arroyo wall in 1962. Embedded in a layer of hardened volcanic ash were stone projectile points, scrapers, and the butchered bones of extinct camelids and mammoths. The tools were bifacially flaked, sophisticated, unmistakably human. The problem was the ash. The layer was a cemented volcanic tuff known as the Hueyatlaco ash. The United States Geological Survey sent samples to 3 laboratories. The first run used fission track dating on microscopic zircon crystals trapped in the ash. The number came back 250,000 years. They assumed contamination. A second sample was extracted from a deeper, sealed lens of the same deposit and dated with uranium series disequilibrium. 250,000 years. Then the USGS performed a third, completely independent test using tetrahydration analysis on volcanic glass shards. The same date, 250,000 years. Read that number again. Sophisticated stone toolmakers were hunting megafauna in central Mexico, an astonishing 200,000 years before modern humans supposedly reached the Americas. The chief geochronologist on the project, Virginia Steen McIntyre, wrote up the findings for a 1981 quaternary research paper. The archaeological community attacked with unbridled ferocity. The date was impossible, so the site must be incorrectly interpreted. Steen McIntyre was told by a senior figure in American archaeology that she would never work in the field again if she persisted. She persisted. The site was locked. Excavation permits were denied. The journals stopped answering. Hueyatlaco vanished from conference programs. The textbooks never mentioned it, but the ash had spoken. And its date aligns not with Clovis orthodoxy, but with the Cerruti mastodon, another 130,700-year-old anomaly that the Academy tried to bury. 2 sites, 2 independent dating methods, 2 separate continents, 1 shared timeline that the story of human origins cannot accommodate. Here's where it gets worse. Because when you plot all 5 discoveries on a globe, the Cerruti mastodon at 33 degrees north, the Trochilos footprints at 35 degrees north, the Lomekwi tools on the equator in East Africa, the Apodema skull in Greece, and the 250,000-year-old Valsequillo tools in Mexico, and then you add the Piri Reis coastline of an ice-free Antarctica, a pattern emerges that makes prehistory look like a deliberate fiction. All these sites feature either a human or a tool, using presence at a time when the official timeline insists none should exist. And they are not clustered in a single cradle. They are scattered across the entire planet as if someone was already everywhere. The second act question, the one that the establishment never asks, is not just, how did a human foot reach Crete 5.7 million years ago? It is also, how did a cartographer in 1513 map Antarctica's coast with such precision, unless an unknown civilization charted it before the ice? The Ross Ice Shelf sonar shape, dated to 14.6 million years by encrusting minerals, sits in the same Antarctic quadrant that Piri Reis drew. That is not coincidence. That is a data point. Now open the Naval Archive. In 1971, the Soviet research vessel Ob reported a massive underwater formation while conducting a magnetometric survey of the continental shelf off Queen Maud Land. The report, classified by the Hydrographic Service of the USSR until 1993, describes a rectilinear ridge of non-volcanic origin extending for 11 kilometers at a depth of 1,100 meters. The Soviet scientists used side-scan sonar and a towed proton magnetometer. They ran the transect 3 times. Each pass returned a sharp magnetic anomaly consistent not with basalt, but with a dense, ferromagnetic line of symmetry, something artificial. The data was filed under geological anomaly and publicly dismissed, but a former technician on the Ob later stated in a 2005 interview that the ridge had the acoustic signature of a cut stone wall. The coordinates of that ridge lie 120 kilometers from the borehole where the 2018 ROV recorded the rectilinear shape. When you overlay the Soviet magnetometry map on the modern ice-penetrating radar grid, the 2 anomalies are connected by a straight-line fracture in the bedrock that does not follow any known fault line. The Piri Reis coastline matches the edge of that same bedrock plateau. 3 separate instruments, 3 separate eras, 3 separate nations, all pointing at the same forbidden conclusion. Something lies beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet that predates the ice itself, and someone mapped it before the ice arrived. This is the uncomfortable truth that ties every discovery together. The Cerruti Mastodon says humans were in California 130,700 years ago. The Lomekwi tools say technology began 3.3 million years ago. The Apodema skull says modern humans were in Greece 210,000 years ago. The Trachylos footprints say bipedalism arrived 5.7 million years ago. The Hueyatlaco site says Mexico was populated 250,000 years ago, and the sonar, the Soviet magnetometry, and the Piri Reis map all say Antarctica was mapped by a maritime civilization before the ice swallowed it. Every one of these artifacts was tested and retested. Different machines, different laboratories, different decades. The numbers do not move. What moves is the response: ridicule, silence, career destruction. Not because the science is weak, because the paradigm cannot survive. A hidden Antarctica, a human presence stretching millions of years into deep time, an intelligence that left footprints, tools, maps, and structures on every continent. This is the history they cannot let you see. Somewhere out there, under kilometers of polar darkness, the next borehole drill is already being lowered. The cameras will turn on again, and when they do, the shape they record will not be a glitch, it will be the answer. Drop your theory below, because the official story has no explanation. And if you want to see what marine archaeologists just pulled from the ruins of Dwarka, 40 meters beneath the Arabian Sea, click the video on your screen now.